Her father ordered her to marry a man twice her age, so she ordered a coffin that breathed in a kingdom where black spires pierced the perpetual mist like accusing fingers, and gold was the only language that mattered. Lived Camilla, the Duke's only daughter. Her mother had been buried beneath cold marble 7 winters ago. Now her father, Lord Aldrich, wanted to bury Camilla's future. Beside her, Count Malvern was 50 years old, with a belly like a sack of coins, and eyes that measured every woman like livestock. He owned gold mines, so vast that small countries paid him tribute. To Lord Aldrich, the Count was not a man, he was an opportunity, wrapped in velvet and greed. Camilla refused the match. In the great hall, her voice steady, even as her hands trembled behind her back. Her father's eyes turned to flint. "Then you will marry in chains," he hissed, loud enough for the entire court to hear. "And those chains will be made of my disappointment." But Camilla was no ordinary, noble daughter. For 3 long years, she had studied the castle's hidden architecture. In secret, every forgotten passageway, every hollow wall, every forgotten blueprint left by her late grandfather. She knew that in this world, women possessed only one true weapon, the perfect illusion of surrender. So she began to play the role. She wept in the corridors, where servants could see. She fasted until her cheeks grew hollow, and her eyes sank into shadows. She let her laughter die, until the castle believed her spirit was truly broken. And when her father finally smiled with satisfaction, believing he had won, she struck. "Father," she whispered one night, in the dim glow of a single candle, her voice trembling like a dying flame. "Only one wish, before I obey you forever. A candelabrum for my wedding chamber, 40 candles, carved from the blackest oak, 500 gold crowns." Lord Aldrich calculated the prestige it would bring, the display of wealth, the proof that his daughter had finally submitted. He smiled a cold smile and agreed without hesitation. The very next morning, veiled and alone, Camilla slipped out to visit Master Garrick, the master carpenter, in the lower town. She unrolled her secret drawing across his workbench. It was not merely a candelabrum. Inside its massive 7-foot frame lay a hidden chamber, tall enough for a woman to stand straight, wide enough to breathe and move, clever enough to hide a life. A spring-loaded door that opened only from within, air slits disguised as carvings, a small latch that could be locked from inside. The old carpenter looked at the sapphire she placed in his wrinkled palm, then into the storm-gray eyes of the girl before him. He saw the fire no one else had noticed. "Some pieces build prisons," he murmured softly. "Others build salvation. This one, I will make it breathe." 2 weeks later, the candelabrum arrived. At the castle, a towering monster of carved darkness, heavy as guilt, and twice as silent. Camilla herself, under the cover of night, filled its secret heart. Strips of dried meat, water skins, a small sharp knife, a single tallow candle, and a bundle of wool. For warmth, her father admired its grandeur. In the wedding chamber, he ran his fingers over the glossy black wood and never noticed the almost invisible seam, the silent mechanism that opened only for her. 3 nights before the dreaded wedding, Lord Aldrich found her chamber empty. Only her silk slippers remained neatly placed beneath the window, overlooking the deadly chasm where so many broken noblewomen had leaped to their deaths before her. He wept for 3 full days, tearing his robes and cursing the gods. Then he sold the candelabrum to a passing merchant for a handsome price, and told the entire kingdom that his daughter had chosen death over duty. He never knew, could never even imagine, that she was still inside it, heart hammering against oak, listening to his footsteps fade away, tasting the salt of his grief through the wood, as the massive candelabrum was loaded onto a cart and began its long, swaying journey into the unknown. Weeks passed in total darkness. Camilla counted every bump of the road, every night, every breath. She rationed her food carefully. She whispered stories to herself to stay sane. She traced the carvings with her fingertips until she knew every leaf and vine by heart. The coffin breathed with her, and she breathed with it. Finally reached the prosperous city of Valmont and was auctioned in the Grand Market Square. Prince Julian, 23 years old, famous across the realm for his unmatched blade and his haunting silence, bought it with every coin he carried. He was to marry Lady Seraphina in 6 weeks, a woman chosen by the crown, not by his heart, a political alliance dressed as love. He placed the black monster in his private royal chambers and gave the strictest orders. No servants were to enter after dusk, no visitors, no questions. Then he waited. The first night, his untouched dinner vanished from the silver plate, wiped clean with surgical precision, crumbs arranged exactly as before. The second night, he pretended to sleep, one eye cracked open in the shadows. At midnight, the seam opened like a secret. A pale, trembling hand emerged first, then an arm, then a shoulder. Finally, a young woman appeared. She moved like someone who had forgotten the taste of sunlight. She reached for his bread with desperate but graceful fingers. She ate as if survival was a prayer. "Does the pastry meet your expectations, my lady?" Julian's voice cut through the darkness, soft, steady, and strangely kind. Camilla froze. Her storm-gray eyes widened in surprise. She leaned back across the table. Julian caught her before she could slip to the marble floor. She felt very light. Through the rough servant clothes, he noticed how thin she was. When she woke up in the morning, the warm light from the fire made her face look nice and golden. Her dark hair had some small wood bits in it. She had pretty cheekbones and soft gray eyes. "Who are you?" he asked in a kind voice while kneeling next to her. "Nobody," she rasped, voice hoarse from disuse. "A ghost who simply forgot to stop breathing." She told him everything. Her father's greed, the forced marriage to a man old enough to be her grandfather, the coffin she had designed with her own hands, the escape that had become a new and terrifying prison. Julian listened without interrupting, his own guarded heart cracking open. For the first time in years, for the first time in his life, someone was speaking to him, not at him, not for political gain, but truly to him. From that night onward, Prince Julian began waiting for darkness, the way other men waited for dawn. Every evening, he brought her new books, fresh fruit, warm bread, and quiet news from the kingdom. He told her his own buried truths, the crushing weight of the crown on his young shoulders, the arranged marriage that felt like a noose tightening around his soul, the deep fear that he had forgotten how to love or be loved. "You're not broken," Camilla whispered one night as they sat on the floor beside the dying fire. "You're guarded. They taught you that wanting anything for yourself is weakness." "And you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I refuse to be useful to anyone but myself," she replied, a small defiant smile breaking through the shadows. "I chose freedom, even if that freedom meant living inside a wooden box." For months, they did not kiss. That night, the moment was still, too fragile, too new. But when she returned to her candelabrum at dawn, she left the hidden door cracked open, the smallest, most dangerous invitation the world had ever seen. Lady Seraphina's spies were everywhere. In the palace, she soon learned of the strange purchase, the locked chambers, the prince who now smiled at nothing, and spent hours alone. She sent her most trusted maid, Mara, to watch through the keyhole. Mara saw the seam open. She saw the ghost girl. She reported back, expecting praise and reward. Instead, Seraphina struck her so hard that her lip was hurt. "No one must ever know," she hissed, eyes blazing with cold fury. "Not a single soul. But gossip, like fire, travels faster than anyone can control." Seraphina realized she was losing control. In 3 short weeks, she would be forced to marry a man whose heart already belonged to a phantom who lived inside a candelabrum. So she chose fire, slow, deliberate, and merciless. When Julian left for a 3-day hunting trip in the northern forests, Seraphina saw her chance. She requested the magnificent candelabrum as a centerpiece for her private dinner with the queen's ladies. The queen, weary of court tensions, approved without question. Guards carried the heavy black oak away. They never heard the frantic, desperate knocking coming from deep inside. Camilla felt the movement. Instantly, different echoes, different voices. Panic rose in her throat, like bile. She pressed against the hidden door, beat it with bleeding fists, until her knuckles split, screamed until her voice cracked into broken whimpers. Exhaustion finally forced her into stillness. Then she smelled it. Smoke. Seraphina had planned. With ice-cold precision, 40 candles were lit around the room. Ladies were invited as unwitting witnesses to her innocence. She excused herself gracefully, locked the chamber door from outside, and placed a brazier of glowing hot coals directly at the candelabrum's base, close enough to heat the wood slowly, inevitable enough to turn it into an inferno. The fire crept upward, like a patient predator. The dense black oak resisted at first, but the heat grew. Hidden oils began to hiss and pop. Choking smoke poured into the secret chamber. Camilla woke to burning lungs and blinding darkness. The air was thick, hot, and killing. She found the mechanism by touch alone, fingers raw and trembling, eyes streaming tears, consciousness slipping away like sand. With the very last fragments of her strength, she forced the door open and tumbled out into Seraphina's chamber, now a roaring inferno of orange light, crackling wood, and suffocating heat. She ran, on pure instinct, toward the tall window. She shattered the glass with a heavy chair, cutting her arms and legs, and threw herself into the night. The moat rushed up to meet her like a cold, filthy embrace. She sank deep, fought desperately against the weight of her clothes, broke the surface, gasping, and dragged her broken body onto the muddy bank. Naked, burned across her back and shoulders, skin blistered, but miraculously alive. Above her, alarm bells rang wildly. Across the castle, the east wing was burning. She crawled into the tall reeds and disappeared into the darkness. Old Tomas, a weathered fisherman who checked his nets at dawn every morning for 40 years, found her curled among the rushes, weak and barely conscious. Without asking a single question, he carried her gently to his tiny cottage by the river. He cared for her with herbs, honey, and soft linen. He wrapped her in his late wife's old shawl and gave her warm broth. When she woke 3 days later, feverish and afraid, he simply smiled and said, "From today, you are Marin, my daughter from the countryside. Keep your eyes down, speak softly, and the world will forget you wherever anyone else." Camilla became Marin. She learned to mend fishing nets until her fingers ached. She learned to speak in a rural accent She learned to laugh at the right moments and cry at the wrong ones. She learned the quiet rhythm of a simple life, and in that simplicity, she found a strange kind of peace she had never known in the castle. Meanwhile, Prince Julian returned from the hunt to a palace in chaos and ashes. He searched the ruins of Seraphina's chamber with his own hands until they were raw. He found nothing but charred wood and lies. Seraphina wept convincingly and suggested that the prince had imagined everything, that perhaps grief and loneliness had clouded his mind. Julian stopped eating. He stopped speaking. He lay in his rebuilt chambers, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the end to come. His body grew thin. His eyes lost their light. The king, desperate to save his only son, opened the castle gates to the people. "Let them feed him," he ordered. "Perhaps in the love of the common folk, he will remember why life is still worth living." Thousands came. Peasants with humble stews, nobles with fine dishes, mothers with bread still warm from the oven. Julian accepted nothing. He lay still, barely moving, as if caught between life and silence. In the fisherman's cottage, Marin heard the royal proclamation. She felt a sharp ache in her chest and understood that her silence was slowly harming the only person who had ever truly seen her. She could not simply walk into the castle. A scarred fisher girl, claiming to be the prince's phantom, would be laughed at, imprisoned, or disappeared forever. She needed to be recognized. Without the slightest doubt. "Make the soup," she told Tomas. One quiet evening, her voice steady, for the first time in weeks. "The exact one I taught you. That night by the fire. The one with wild herbs. And a touch of honey. He will know it." Tomas carried the humble clay bowl through the jeering crowd of thousands. Guards laughed. Courtiers smirked. But the king's proclamation allowed everyone to try. He stood before the prince's sickbed and spoke quietly. "From my daughter, Your Highness. She says you will know her by this." Julian lifted his head. With great effort, the steam rose from the bowl, and suddenly he recognized it. Not the taste of any palace kitchen, but the exact blend of herbs and quiet love she had once cooked for him in secret. During those midnight hours, he sat up slowly, took the bowl with shaking hands, drank one swallow, then another. Strength flooded back into his body like sunlight after an endless winter night. Color returned to his cheeks. His eyes cleared. "Where?" he demanded, his voice suddenly filled with urgency. Tomas told him everything. The moat, the injuries, the new name, the quiet cottage. Guards rode out at full speed. They returned with a woman wrapped in rough wool, her face marked by fire, her eyes cautious but shining with quiet strength. The entire court fell into silence as she entered the great hall. They saw a peasant girl. They saw someone who had survived the flames. They saw the woman who had brought their prince back from the edge of despair. Julian rose from his bed in 3 unsteady steps. He did not touch her, not yet. He simply looked at her with an expression of deep recognition and love that no one in that grand hall had ever witnessed before. "Camilla," he said, the name resting like a promise on his lips. "Marin," she corrected softly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Or whatever name survived the fire. I am no longer my father's daughter. I am no longer bound to the past. I am what remains and what chooses every single day to keep breathing. You are mine," Julian declared to the stunned court, his voice ringing clear and strong. "You have been mine since the night you left that door cracked open, since you survived what was meant to destroy you. I will marry this woman, or I will marry no one." The king began to laugh, a deep, relieved, joyful sound that echoed through the hall. "Then we shall arrange a wedding and a reckoning for those who tried to steal our future." Lady Seraphina was stripped of all titles and exiled to a remote northern convent. As she was led away in chains, she looked at Camilla one final time. "You should have died," In that fire, she whispered bitterly, the crown uses everyone. You simply made yourself useful in a different way. Camilla did not answer. She had already survived far worse than cruel words. Her father, Lord Aldrich, arrived at the palace, expecting to reclaim his valuable daughter and the power that came with her. Instead, he found a woman who offered him one final deal. He could walk her down the aisle and appear publicly reconciled, but upon his death, the entire duchy would pass to her alone, not to any husband or future sons, but to her, recognized by royal decree as the rightful heir. In her own name, he signed the papers. With trembling, defeated hands, they married in spring, beneath trees, heavy with white blossoms. Camilla walked toward a man who had never once tried to own her. Their vows were not the ancient words of the kingdom. They were ones they had written together, in secret, words of choice, of recognition, of doors that open both ways, and of trust, freely given. In a private ceremony afterward, in the very courtyard where she had once fallen burning and broken from the window, they built a small, controlled fire. In its center, they placed the charred remains of the black candelabrum. The base cracked open, the arms twisted by heat, the wood that had been both prison and sanctuary for so many months. Camilla lit it herself. With a steady hand, she watched the flames consume what had once saved her life and nearly taken it away. It was a good coffin, she said quietly, voice full of quiet wonder. It taught me I could survive enclosure, taught me how to breathe in complete darkness, taught me how to build a door where none existed, and how to leave it open for someone worthy. Julian took her hand, gently, his thumb tracing the faint scars that fire had left behind. And now, my love, what will you build next? She smiled, the firelight dancing in her storm-gray eyes, like stars reborn. Windows, she answered. I will leave them open, even when the wind is cold, even when it is dangerous, even when the world tells me to close them, because the opposite of a prison, Julian, is not safety. The opposite of a prison is trust. From the warm ashes, she collected a single piece of charcoal and placed it inside a simple silver locket she would wear for the rest of her life. Quiet, personal reminder that even the darkest wood, when touched by enough fire and enough love, can finally become light.